There we go. We got it. Okay.
We did it.
We are in it. Okay. I did that earlier, but it didn't work. Isn't that funny? Oh my God. So anyway, hello
Well,
everyone. Oh my gosh. Welcome to another episode of This Time Around with this time my guest and longtime friend, Dr. Marilyn Volker, sexologist. You're a lot more than a sexologist, I think you are. I think you are. Oh my gosh. Hello. Hello, my friend.
and hello, it is an honor. It is an honor to be on your
Oh,
podcast. And it's been an honor to not only be your friend, certainly, but to work with you for so
oh,
many times doing
oh my God.
presentations.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I know I've told you that I have been in this wonderful, like, rite of passage of so many more feelings and experiences coming to the surface. So last week on my podcast, I did something and I called it Let's Get Real About Touch. I don't remember what the
Ah,
subtitle I put
oh,
was, but I told them that I thought that in the next episode that you would be here and that maybe, we would get to the 4 T's and the 5 kinds of touch or the 8 types of intimacy. And
sure.
I wonder, one of the things that I've always been most amazed of as I've known you is how much you're really not just talking about sex. You are really talking with people about relationships.
Yes.
And
Yes. And connection,
yes,
because that part is how people connect with people in differing ways, differing ways. So when you were talking about the 5 types of touches, um, it's really amazing because when I ask people about it, because a lot of times when they say intimacy, people think only of sex. And in these types of touches, one can be um, observational touch, which is how does this feel to me, to you, to somebody else? How does it feel? And that's called observational touch. And one is called nurturing touch. And that can be giving or getting a massage. It can be touching hair or face or feet. One of my patients said, "Ooh, I like feet, nurturing." So, um, so nurturing doesn't mean you have to have sex. A lot of people told me also when somebody washes their hair, oof,
for them,
that's
for
yes,
them.
for
Yes.
that. Ooh, that's nurturing.
Yeah.
It,
Isn't that interesting? I remember reading the book by Amanda Knox. You remember when Amanda was held in the UK because they thought that she had killed that
yes,
woman in the college dorm or something. And she had this wonderful boyfriend at the time who was also accused. And it was horribly painful to me to know that they got separated and she got with someone else and moved on. But I always remember one of the things he did for her is he washed her ears. It was
yeah,
just such a
yeah,
sweet thought.
yes, yes, and that's what you know exploratory touches, because a lot of people wouldn't even think about that and how their body would respond in many, many areas. And that could be nurturing touch to her. It could have been um, a playful
Mm-hmm.
touch, clothes on, clothes off, whatever it is. If you have an animal, I always say, do you have playful touch with an animal? And now we can go to four-legged or two-legged.
That's right. That's right.
And so playful. And then there's a sensuous. People always confuse sensuous touch. I can't say always, but many times
Yeah,
they'll confuse sensuous touch with sexual touch. Sensuous of the senses doesn't have to go to sex, or it might, but of the senses, what people like to hear, what some people like absolute silence. other people like people to talk. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they want to see something. Sometimes one woman said she wanted to sing. Well, uh, getting all these touches, she
She
wanted
wanted to
something.
sing, not
She
she
wanted
wanted.
to.
That's interesting. And
Mhm.
do you think that was a way of her letting go? Do you think that was a, yeah, that's
Very
interesting.
clearly,
Yeah.
because a lot of people in sensuousness, it sometimes helps relaxes them. Um, and she said it helped her relax because a lot of people said, she was on a panel one time and she said, don't you get distracted if you're singing? She said, oh, no, 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 no. I get involved. I'll always remember involved because it allows me not to be distracted by other things.
Uh-huh.
And
So she
so,
knew that it was her way of getting even more in focus of the
yes,
experience. That's interesting.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people, and then there is sexual touch. Yes, absolutely. And many people have to go through the getting aroused by some of these other touches, and other people are like, let's go, let's do it. And so I can't make an assumption, but I sure have learned a lot about different types of touches. And so that part is really important. A lot of times people stop touching if they have um, other issues, other
Mm-hmm.
things get in the way.
Yeah,
And
sure.
some of them could be the 8 types of intimacy. Did you talk about them?
Not yet. No, no. And I do want to get to that. I wondered though, why do you think, I'm glad there's a train making a lot of noise, but why do you think that someone would want something very personal done to them? Like it could be the ears that I mentioned, or it could be a bath, or it could be when if somebody was suddenly having to have those things done to or for them because of a debilitating circumstance or getting too old to be able to do it for themselves. What's the difference there between wanting it and not liking it?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Because if somebody feels forced by age, circumstance, differences, and ugh, then I don't have a choice in that area, in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that can make a huge difference that if they are choosing, they're choosing, I like this type of touch, or I like this kind of connection. All right. And having a shower or bath together, or having someone wash your hair, that can be very sensuous.
Oh,
It also
definitely. Yeah,
it also could feel sexual to some people. Their body
absolutely.
could get aroused. They
Mm-hmm.
could even have orgasms, and they're not even having their genitals touched. So,
I
and the
wondered
ears,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and the ears are, it goes inside the body. So, one of the patients that I had worked with called it ear sex. And really, really, she liked because they were doing something called body mapping in the touching. Let's start, and in sex therapy, we start step by step by step so that each person sees where their body is at this point in time, too, and with the other person, and how does their body respond. So, ear sex, she said, felt even more intimate than any kind of touch on the genitals because it was something she experienced with this special partner. And she didn't want everybody doing things in her ears, just this partner.
There's that
So,
partner. It's interesting.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
Mm, very interesting. Wow. That's fascinating. And you told me about a couple that said that they only did sexual touch. And when we started talking about this a couple weeks ago, that they really
yes,
weren't doing any other kind of touch. And
yes,
how interesting and in a way sad. Maybe. Were they
yes.
struggling? Were they having good sex?
Well, it's interesting because, um, Debbie, people do not come to talk with me and pay me money to tell me how great their sex life is.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, or to any of us who does counseling, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think they came because they thought we are not, and they used the word not normal. And then they felt, well, maybe there's other parts of our body after these years. So I think they were seeking something else besides, I'm not against genital touching, but they, I think, had a feeling that we're just going right there and there may be other parts of our body that can respond. And so we did the body mapping, and that includes all these touching, okay? And how do people respond, what they like or don't like, and when they really respond. So a lot of people have said, I like to have a back rub or a face rub. However, I have to know that I'm choosing it, not being forced. And so
Sure.
part of that, not only conversation, but part of that exploration with them was, what would you like to explore on your body or my body today? And so that part, what would you like to have in touches? So they tried a lot of things. I was very impressed with them because many people stop having sex and for all kinds of reasons. But they were wanting to explore and see how can we, well, find out about different touches, which I think is great, whether it's on yourself or with
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
else. Wow.
Well,
Wow. Yes.
yeah. And I think that observational touch is so important because there are many times that I think people sort of guess at touch and they don't want to admit that they aren't sure or that they feel awkward because they're afraid they're going to be judged as inadequate. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe they don't even know what they like, or they don't want, it's sort of like the old stereotype of the man that doesn't want to ask for directions when he's driving,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
don't want to admit that, hey, I'm not really sure. And I know I've had people touch me and I think, oh, I wish they could pay more attention to how I'm touching them. They might know even more of what I like, because I think a lot of times people touch in a way that shows what they like.
Yes. And
And it, yeah,
if you pay attention to that, yes, thank you.
yeah, yeah. So that's really interesting. I know when I was taking the sexology courses, because I was starting on a doctorate, my second doctorate that I started on that I decided not to finish. I wonder in a way about going back at some point. But anyway, one of the topics that came up was the idea that it was almost like talked about as something of the future to help people with boredom in the bedroom, to help people not be bored. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder, yeah, and I wonder if part of that is because of relationship issues that get in the way, like I remember hearing a little poem once that said, I like you because I love you, although.
Ah.
And it
Ah.
kind of reminds me of oftentimes when people start hanging around each other, in the beginning, it's like the magic. And then after a while, it's like, oh, you know, you have these agendas and I have these agendas. And now you're on my case about that. And I wish you would do this and that. And how come you said, it goes to this day-to-day conditional stuff.
Mm-hmm. 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 And in those stages of what you're talking about, a lot of times at the beginning, it's called the fantasy sex. It's called,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, hey, this is new. I like it. You like it. And you must like me because you want sex, or I must like you. And then you get into the relationship issues.
Yeah.
And if they're not worked on, then sex can become boring. And there's another word, it's called, okay, I got it, anhedonic, not pleasurable. It
Mhm.
isn't that it's awful, but it could be just eh,
Yeah.
eh, And
Like,
that's
just
true for
do
men.
this. We'll just do this, like taking out the trash.
Yes, yes, yes. And in fact, men can feel the same way too.
Mhm.
Um, and I never make that assumption because I've worked with two men together, two women together, people who have open or closed um, relationships. So I have to be careful not to bring in. But that is one thing that a lot of um, men have said, I'm supposed to know. Or if you fall into gender traps, okay, of, oh, I'm supposed to do my duty is, I still hear that from some women, my duty.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and, and yet, if that, if the whole body connected to the brain, heart in between, how it's um, felt and how it's expressed, yes, yes. So
Really? Yeah.
a part of what you're talking about is also the communication part of a lot of areas in the relationship. Yes. And sex is one of them where they can fall off the rails, I call it. It just doesn't happen. And it's not going to happen in the same way, like, holy cow, like when you first met. No, it actually could become richer
Yes.
and deeper
Mhm.
if you continue to do that exploratory types of touching these. And because people people also change or they learn a lot about their bodies or they're willing to experience, which I think is amazing.
That's really good. That's really good.
Yeah.
If they can also keep the nurturing and the playful
Mhm.
and and to maybe, find those ways of talking that move out of that sort of blame and shame and all those things, which can really take years for people,
Oh,
or yeah, to
yes.
move.
And and many people have only been taught their life experiences. They've only been taught of sex or no sex, not about all these other types of touching
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
again, it could be with various people. Um, and I'm not even talking about an open relationship. I'm talking if somebody washes your hair. Ah, if you're giving somebody a massage. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. And that the giver or the receiver can really benefit from these touches that don't have to end in sex, but the body can respond, the heart and spirit can, wow, expand.
Mm.
And oh, so that kind of
That is
closeness,
sweet.
and I'm not against sex, I'm just saying that
Right.
kind of closeness is sweet,
It
Debbie.
is sweet.
Absolute, absolute.
I have a friend who says that um, her husband wishes that she wanted it more, and wishes that she, really was willing to get. And she said, I just like it just doesn't work. And I said, but are you able to still be close? Are you able to still like cuddle and feel that
Mm-hmm.
closeness? And she said, yes. And she said,
Uh-huh.
that is all still really nice.
Good,
Yeah.
excellent. Because
Yeah.
that kind of and sometimes it's in the touches that sensuousness um, is important and how it feels close and cuddling. There, do you know, Debbie? There are now parties called cuddling parties.
I have heard this.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the reason is because sometimes people are not wanting to just go, I'm going to use the word hookup just because I met you, some may, but there are cuddling parties where they will get together and if a group of people want to cuddle or one or two people, and that's the sole purpose, is to have that connection and not feel, oh, I have to have sex. And then how does that feel if you have a cuddle connection? So
And
that's one of the newest things that I have been reading
I've,
and
yeah,
listening.
I've heard of that. And is it kind of like a rule that there is no sex? Is it kind of like that's a baseline for those
Right,
that, yeah,
right,
it's
right.
like the nude sunbathing. I know people that have been a member of nudist camps, and
Mhm.
they said no, it's not sexual.
Yeah.
And they even told me, which was very interesting, they told me that there was one man there who's blind who would go, and he was the only one walking around with an erection. Now that's fascinating. It's
Yes,
fascinating to
yes,
me. The
yes.
power of the imagination, you know,
Oh,
isn't
yes,
that amazing?
yes.
And
I,
and they never said
that says
anything
his
to him.
blood flow. Yeah, well, that one thing is healthy, is that his blood flow is working.
Yeah.
Because erections are about blood
Yeah.
flow. And the fact that, well, you brought up something, because a lot of people have a lot of, as you know, mythologies and distortions, and his imagination, and also it means his willingness to take off his clothes. Wow.
Oh,
because
yeah.
because you also have to be, I'm going to say, face vulnerability, um, about nudity,
Yeah.
and so, or what you've been taught about it. So I remember the first time, when I was in California working on my doctorate. We went to many places, and one of them was a nudist household. We didn't have to be nude, and but they said they always felt comfortable, but they had to face, the people who were nude said we had to face the messages we were taught about bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and this is nasty, you cover it up. That was one of them said. And so for some it was very much healing, from the messages or the experiences they had. So yes, yes, nudist beaches, yeah,
Interesting.
amazing.
Very interesting. Yeah, because I remember an audio tape that a professor had given me for a sexuality class, and it was some, I guess it was a doctor, but a group of people that worked together. And one of the things that they would do was have a woman, particularly who was filled with a lot of shame, um, undress and, like be on the table. And I don't know if she was being examined or not, but a whole bunch of people that were that were in her life in one way or another were just there to watch, and for her to get kind of move beyond the fears and the judgments and things like that. I mean, it's like there are
Yeah,
people who cannot, who, I mean, it's one thing to prefer things in the dark, and then there are people who absolutely are afraid to be seen. They're just like, don't look at me.
thank you, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, um, you know, what kind of messages and experiences they've had about looking at bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and looking or examining your own body, and what messages do you want to give yourself about your body?
Sure.
You don't have to lay on a table if you don't want for people to examine, but then also, it's getting comfortable if you do go to a doctor and get examined. If you do, it has to be somebody, I hope, you would trust. And then if there's any hospital experiences, oh boy, there's a lot of
Sure.
body, examinations, and therefore, um, how the messages we got about our bodies, about touch, about people seeing a nude body. All right, again, very, it's very, very interesting. In some cultures around the world, people all go into the river together, nude, and they take a bath together.
Oh.
And and so that's the message. Like, there's nothing nasty.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in here getting bathed. And it's so interesting to see cultures and messages. Absolutely.
I thought about that and have thought that there probably are cultures where orgasm is just included in everything and it's okay. I mean, it's not taboo, it's
Yep.
just part of lots of things. It's probably done to babies to heal them, or it's done to, it's just done as a part of soothing and being okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. And
fascinating.
some people, oh yeah, babies can have orgasms. It's a
Mhm.
muscle contraction.
Right,
Okay. And
right.
babies have orgasms, um and and people can now, sometimes people have negative experiences, so they don't want to keep going.
Mhm.
And then I worked with a young man who didn't want to go to ejaculation because he thought he was perverted, by himself,
Mm,
and that he needed to be with someone else, which meant he really put himself in situations that he didn't always want
right,
for the experience, all right, of, of ejaculation, which is all about the prostate in a man's body. And you got the semen, and when it gets to the prostate, he will ejaculate. He will,
right.
either out the penis or backward in the bladder, which is called retrograde. Sometimes it's a disease, sometimes it's medication. And the joke among guys is, holy cow, now I'm back to pre-puberty. So sometimes having a sense of humor about things as you're working on them
Yeah.
uh, can help.
Can
Can
help
help.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you're with people who have that sense of humor when you're together on it. You mentioned something earlier about um, spontaneous orgasms. So I've wondered about this. Are there people, I know, I imagine there are with men, but women as well, who have them just by thought or feeling? I know it can happen in dreams, but even in the waking state.
That's right. You are correct, because I was going to say a lot of people have orgasms in a dream state, and they wake up and they've had a ejaculation or a vaginal orgasm or clitoral orgasm. In an awake state, some women have said, I get aroused again if somebody is, and then I ask them, because that's where we do the body mapping. If I get my hair washed, whoo, and I have these little,
Yeah,
she said, mini orgasms, little mini orgasms. And she said, at first I thought, are we supposed to have sex? Am I wanting to have sex? No, it is your body getting aroused by a sensuous touch or nurturing, and your
fascinating.
body is responding to that. And it could
Fascinating.
be masturbating, but it could also be any one of touches on body. And like the ear person, well, there
Yeah,
are feet person who've had
right.
orgasms by, ooh,
Hmm.
feet being nurtured, touched. Wow.
Fascinating. Hmm.
Mhm. And by thoughts,
And
which
by
is why
thoughts.
why a lot of people use fantasy as well. What are you thinking about when somebody is touching your body like a massage or washing your hair? Are you are you focused on that experience and the sensuousness or the exploratory touch of it? Or do you go into a fantasy, which can also lead into that orgasmic arousal state? Sure.
Are we learning some things about older people and the potential of either? I know we've talked a little bit, you and I, about older people and alternative ways if maybe the sexual isn't happening as much, or how about the nurturing? How about the sensuous? How about maybe it isn't sexual? Are we also learning about the potential for added enjoyment in older people of sex?
Oh, sure, sure. Senior sensuousness, I call it, senior sexuality. Yes. If one allows themselves to one, not buy into the myth that it's just for the young, the beautiful, and shapely. No, I think that as, I'm going to say seniors, learn about some of the changes in their body, but what is the same? They actually can appreciate, oh, how does this feel now? Now,
Mhm.
any if there's any diseases or any things that changes also with age, like some men have to stand in order to ejaculate. And I
Oh,
always want to
interesting.
know, did you always have to do that? But a lot of older men will say they like to lay down if they're touching, rubbing, okay, caressing. But in order to ejaculate, it's better for them to stand up. Okay,
Interesting.
plan B.
Standing
Yes,
room only.
yes. And I always like to see as people get older, the oldest couple I ever worked with was a couple, one was 92 and was 90.
Was
And
what? The
I
second
was
one?
this young, I call it
It
90,
broke 80,
90,
90,
92,
90 and 92.
92. And yes, they were the oldest couple I ever worked with. And I was this young, I call it a young kid compared to them. And and I just was so interested because I could tell them step by step. But I thought, what great role models. I hope I can be like them. If I live till 90 and 92, I hope I'd be willing to still see how and it's my body and my brain and my heart and my willingness.
Yeah,
And that's
sure.
all connected. So,
Absolutely. Yeah,
mhm, mhm.
absolutely.
And some women have said they need to use, even though they might have used a vibrator, but they may need stronger. They may need stronger experiences. So sometimes toys are brought in or vibrators at
Mhm, mhm.
later stages. I mean, I know a lot of people use them in younger years, but some people, okay, what's your plan B as your body has shifted and changed? Okay,
Interesting. Yeah.
tissues can
Hmm.
change, vaginas can atrophy, clitorises can atrophy. That's why I said some men need to stand up. They may need more attention to the penis. They may need what's called, here, I'll give you the medical name, and then the name that people use, venous O retention ring. Nobody
Oh,
talks like that. That's a medical term. Most people say C ring or cock ring. And if a guy's losing his erection, which could be young or older, um, he can put this ring on and it will keep the erection, and it could be a half erection, but it will keep that. And he won't ejaculate until the ring is taken off. Not to be worn all night, and not to use rubber bands. Someone
oh
once
God,
asked me,
no.
could I use rubber band? And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, no,
No.
no.
Mm-mm.
And because that can hurt some of those muscles and veins that you want to keep healthy. But that, yes, we are learning a lot about older people because many of us grew up in a day and age where as kids we didn't hear. But if we went through, I'm going to say women's movement, LGBT movement, HIV, those are all areas that I was very blessed to be a part of. And so in all of those areas, people, if they were fortunate, got to be older. And so I learned a lot too, young and
Well,
old.
and I think there are some people who have added intensity as they get older, where it's not weakening, it's actually strengthening. And I know I've heard of that being like for the empty nest people who don't have things to worry about. And yet I wonder what may be going on with the body that can add to greater height of sort of that ecstasy. I don't know, but it does seem like that
Well,
could.
that can happen because a lot of people even say when they retire, they have more time to focus, although not everybody's happy at first with retirement and others are relieved
Yeah.
in retirement,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that they have time. They have time,
Hmm.
and if they have a partner they trust, time and trust to see.
The T.
Mhm, mhm. Touch, talk, time, and trust.
Oh,
Those are the four. Volker always likes numbers.
I love
Those
it.
are the 4 gear shifts. I always ask people, would you start a car or truck in 5th gear? No. Why? It's going to stall. Okay, right. The truck or car has to be revved up before. So, okay.
Exactly.
And so that talk, touch, and those are those touches, time, and sometimes it takes longer, and other times because you've rested, may not, and trust. That's a
Mhm.
very big one.
Yeah,
So if
beautiful.
trust has been broken in early years, one may have to go and talk about that. And if trust has been broken in a relationship, and no relationship is perfect,
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
relationship, but to keep working on and communicate with boundaries, but talk, touch, time, and trust.
I love
Very,
it. I love it.
uh-huh.
And you also did mention the 8 types of intimacy. Would you go over those?
Sure. I invite people. You do not have to be married, coupled, living with somebody in order to have intimacy, which
Right.
most people think is sex. The first
Mhm.
type is affection. Affection is, how do you show affection for people? Is it talking? Is it cards? Is it um, uh, getting somebody their coffee or drink in the morning? Is it bringing home flowers or something that they like? Is it giving them a massage can be shown affection? So we have affectional intimacy, and then social, doing things together. And with
Yeah.
COVID, a lot of people stopped going out, but you can still have social intimacy in some safe places. So some people went out on their deck or went outside or took walks together. Social
Or
intimacy.
spend time on the phone.
Thank you. There you
Yeah,
go.
sure.
And there's emotional intimacy. And that's telling feelings. And it's a check in, which if you keep everything inside, whew, it can come out sideways. Um, and so, just like in businesses, people will have monthly meetings or something like that. I always say, can you have a check in with somebody you trust on a weekly or at least monthly basis? Do a check in. It could be a counselor you're talking to, it can be a friend, it can be a spouse or partner. Absolutely, somebody you trust. So we have affection, social, emotional, and then there's something called intellectual. One of the people said to me, I'm not a big intellect. And I said, you don't have to be. What do you like to talk about? What do you like to share your work? Do you like to share a hobby, an interest? I like to talk about cats, she said. I went, all right, cats it is. And you talk about cats, and your friends will talk about something that they like as well. Intellectual intimacy.
I like
And
it.
then there's
Mhm.
something called aesthetic intimacy. The teenagers sometimes call it the butt thing, Dr. V, the ass. I go, oh, okay, the ass thing. Aesthetic means sharing something beautiful. And that means, what do you share with people that you really see as beautiful? Sometimes it can be like, oh, when we go making a meal together, some people think that's beautiful. Some people, when they listen to music together,
Mhm.
oh, some people, when they go for a walk, okay, all right, or garden, or do
Sitting,
something.
sitting and
See?
looking at or listening to the ocean.
Oh, that's mine.
I know.
You hit
Yeah.
mine. That's exactly, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that part is important, aesthetic. Then comes spiritual, which may be religious, doesn't have to be. It could be religious, it could be similar values. Like, oh, both of us like to sit out and be in nature. Okay, that was what one couple said. Ah, okay. And they said, Well, that could be aesthetic, and it also
be.
could be spiritual.
Could be
Good.
meditating together. That would be,
Thank
you know,
you.
yeah.
That is exactly. Um, and then comes the sexual intimacy, which could be holding, hugging, kissing, touching. It could start with any of those and cuddling. And it could usually involve something of the genitals of some kind. Although I've worked with people who have been paralyzed, and their bodies feel different. So they have to find where on their body do they get aroused. And so that's important. If somebody doesn't have a partner, and I've worked with 40-year-old virgins, 4-0, and sometimes we have a trained surrogate to work with them step by step by step. Surrogate meaning a person who's going to be a substitute, who's trained and is going to work in a triadic model with a counselor. Because once you go through these step by step by step, hopefully the patient will stay with a counselor and see, can I relate? How do I relate to this step by step? And do I want to invite somebody else into my life as well?
And
So
I know
that's good to.
You've had people that have needed surrogates who have been people that no one would ever imagine. Like I think you told me once you had a psychiatrist who needed a surrogate.
Yes. Yes. Oh, people can be very successful in a job, but in dating, mating, and relating in that way can be very stressful. And yes, I have. I've worked with many people who had a cognitive difference, like autism, or some, they didn't even have the word autism when I was growing up, but on the spectrum. And they can be very bright in other areas, but but they could have space or touch or social issues. And so sometimes the surrogate will go step by step by step and even role play with them of going out on a date, because for some it's social. It's really a social need. How do I ask people out? Where do we go? And what happens? Or are we just going to sit there?
Sure.
You know, so
Yeah.
that
Because
part.
because our society doesn't really necessarily teach a lot of those steps. It's sort of like you're either doing it or you're not.
Yep.
But how
Yep.
do you build up to that? And how do you build that bond? And how do you build up? I mean, I can remember times when I was with somebody and all of a sudden they'd be trying to satisfy me. And I felt like I was in school doing a timed test. You know, like how quickly could I get this done and get it right? That's we live in a society that's a lot about getting things right or not and making the grade and expectations and all kinds of things. So I can understand where that step by step and all that would be really important for some people and for lots of people, maybe.
And you are correct. I think all of us could benefit by that. All of us, the step by step in different stages of life.
Yeah.
And so I've really appreciated learning from many different people, including you, Miss Hazelton, including you.
Oh, haven't we been through so much? Oh my God, haven't we done some great, great work together? Wow. Are those all of the 8 types?
Let's see. All right. Affection, social, emotional, intellectual, aesthetic, spiritual, sexual. There you go.
That's 7.
Up. You are better than I am. Okay, let's see. There's affection, social, emotional, intellectual, aesthetic. I'm missing one.
Maybe playful.
Spiritual, sexual. Oh, yes,
Maybe
that could
playful.
be. Oh, physical.
Physical, different from
Physical.
sexual, maybe.
Yes. Yes. Physical. It could be both, but physical could be like I'm, going to the beach, or, oh, listening to music, or making a meal together. And so that part, physical, yes. But
Or the physical could also be getting that massage that
yes,
isn't necessarily sexual. It's just
right.
physical. Or those
Yes,
cuddle parties might be
yes,
physical and not necessarily, not sexual.
absolute, absolute. And
Be-
for people who haven't been touched or cuddled, that's a big experience too.
yes,
Or people who've lost a partner, and that could be something that they miss immensely. Is that kind of
absolutely.
connect?
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's also important to say that just with lots and lots of things, um, I think that our experience is the most important thing. And so some two people might be together for an activity, and one might feel that it's very satisfying emotionally, and the other might feel that it's very satisfying physically. So it's not
yes,
necessarily that the people would say, okay, now we're doing this kind of intimacy and this kind of intimacy only. Well, maybe not. I mean, it might be different for the different people.
yes, yes. I don't really think of it as 50-50. You
Mm-mm.
could be doing an activity, and there could be all kinds of different thoughts and feelings and emotions that go with it, or the meaning of it. Or if somebody feels I have to do this in any of those,
Right.
oh, that's not good.
No.
That's where the negotiation, the communication, I'll do this, but not this, or I'm not ready to do this. So that part is really interesting. And there are some people who say, I'm done with sex. I don't want to do this anymore. And by the way, it could be men too.
Mm-hmm.
Usually men want sex more because they have more testosterone, a larger sex center in the brain. Okay. But that doesn't mean women don't like it. But some men and some women have said, I'm done with the sexual. I look at the other 7. Are you still wanting to share some of these with a partner? Because you can do intimacy in many different ways. So,
Absolutely.
mhm, mhm.
Do you
And
think what's that?
doing it or not doing it, Deb, when you were talking about taking the test, because then did I pass or fail?
Yeah.
Did I am I
It's
the best you've ever had? Oh, what a question to ask somebody.
That's terrible.
No,
That's
I know.
terrible. Yeah. You said, yeah, there are 3 questions that are often good to ask. You used to talk about.
Mm-hmm,
Do you
mm-hmm.
remember those?
Well, Volker takes about 17 seconds to pull them up at 75 years old.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
um, the first one is always remember, if you're asking somebody something, that they speak in I statements, or if you're sharing, you speak in I statements.
Right. Not you statements. Mm-hmm.
That's
Very important.
I liked this part. My body didn't respond this way so much. Maybe next time, but my body didn't respond. And it isn't about you, it's about my body. Maybe this time, or maybe it has changed, didn't respond so much this way.
So
And
that
and
question
then
is,
what would you like to do is a third one. So what would you like to do different? Or I would like to do this different. So go
so
for it.
the first question is what? Did you like it?
Mm-hmm. Did what in this
What?
experience, whatever the intimacies, what did you like, or what did your body respond
Right.
to in this? The second question is well, I wasn't so crazy. You could do that evaluating if you get food or in a restaurant. Well,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
like this part. We evaluate all the time. You know, I like this part. This
So what
I'm
would
not
you
gonna.
change was the second, right? What would you change, or what would you
That's the third. That's the third
Oh,
part. The
oh, what's
second
this?
one is saying what your body or spirit didn't respond to.
Okay, first is
First
what did
one
you
is
like? What didn't you like?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
And now the third one is you're very correct. What would you change? Now, the other person doesn't have to change it, but what you are getting into is a really emotional and also suggestions. It's not just complain, complain. Let's see. Are there things we want to do different? Do you want to try something different? All right. And there are people who've said to me, um, uh, I don't want to have sex anymore, but if my spouse or partner wants to have an open relationship, okay, I'm okay if it's just sex. And so now comes the boundaries. And not in our house. Here comes the boundaries. So some people will see the boundaries that happen with that. Other people have open relationships. And so I have to see where their relationship is strong. Where is it strong? So if you're going to make a change in any part, what's individually, tell me your strength. What do you know is your strength? And as a team or couple, what is your strength? And so that part, then you can look at if we make changes, all right, we check in. We check in.
Very
It,
interesting.
yeah, it would be like if somebody had to take a new medication. The doc or the nurse practitioner is going to ask about any changes. And I call it the good, the bad, the ugly. Is all right. What good things have happened with this medication? Are there any negative side effects you don't like? And could there be anything else besides meds that you might want to try? So that part, we do this all the time. We evaluate all kinds of things. So I encourage people, share what's going on for you, not with the whole world, people you trust.
Yeah.
um, and also um, be sensitive to what's been changing in your life. Be compassionate.
Right. Because even as you've said to me before about, some different things that you've experienced, that, it could turn the volume down on one thing, but it might
Yes,
turn the volume up on another, so that it's
sure.
really, really, really special still. It doesn't mean that it's all just gone away, or, in a bad kind of way.
No, and my husband's okay if I say this, David, and he at 47 had his first heart attack. We've been together for now 4 years, I think.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I know, and he had his first heart attack at 47 because he had diabetes. And if you understand diabetes, it's about blood flow.
Mm.
And so he hasn't gotten an erection by himself since that time. Viagra worked for a while. We spoke for Pfizer for a while, and then it didn't. So also that's why evaluating. Now, if he wants an erection, he has to give himself a shot to the penis. Now he's fine for me to say all this because
Mm.
he's talked to lots of people about it.
Oh,
And yet we've learned we can still hold, kiss, hug, have sex, even with not an erection. There's all kinds of ways to make love. So I've learned both
beautiful.
personally, and you're talking about, things you went through, Deb, personally and professionally. And I can't make the assumption everybody's going to do the same thing that David and I have done. I can't
Right,
do that.
right, right. Sure.
But I do want to see how the 8 types of intimacy, even if one may be affected in some way, and those touches, okay, and the communication model,
Right.
absolute, absolute. So, yay,
One
Deb.
one last question
Mm-hmm.
that's been on my mind is, do you think, or how do you think that all this with COVID and social distancing and what's been going on over the last couple of years, I guess I can't help but think that a lot of people have been affected by not getting enough touch, not getting touched. And I wonder if you think that's true, and if so, how is that impacting or going to impact as time goes on in our mental health, and what are our textbooks going to look like 10 years
Oh,
from now?
that's a really, really good observation and question, because lots of people have stopped during COVID, stopped, well, doing social things, getting massage, getting their hair done, okay, by somebody that they used to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And socially, whew, that has
Yeah.
affected it. In fact, people are just getting back um, to doing things together, like even to going to some restaurants and where they wouldn't before during COVID. So what I think is a part of it, just my opinion, and I'd love to see a piece of research about this, is
Mm-hmm.
what has happened with these 8 types of intimacy during COVID. What has
Mm-hmm.
happened for you?
Mm-hmm.
Positive, negative, or I don't know, but this has happened. Okay. And also, um, are you doing anything different step by step during COVID, or because people are coming back together? Now, people are still getting COVID, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of our granddaughters had, one of our sons had during that time, and they're both fine now. We're grateful. And uh, that part is what's going to happen as people go through this. And there's a lot of variations of COVID, a lot of
Yeah.
variation of viral things that are happening. But how has that changed individual viewpoints and in those 8 types of intimacy for people individually and with friends and socially? And you are so correct. Um, I was talking to a massage therapist who said, "Boy, did my business go down during
Mm-hmm.
COVID." And yes, just um, just because of the fear, and I understand. I understand.
Well,
Um,
even being in stores and those
mhm,
lines on the floors and insisting on that 6 foot or
mhm,
beyond between people. I mean, I just think that, and the masks where
oh,
people haven't been able to look at each other, and
yep,
even on babies, I've heard. I mean, that's just
yes.
wow, what an impact on people not being able to see smiles and make eye contact. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Oh my
Yes, and
gosh.
also in some schools where children had to be separated by that distance and
Yeah.
then homeschooled and then getting back together, and what are the fears that people have around it.
Well,
And so, yes, that's going to be interesting to see what happens. Oof,
even more
a
sensitive boundaries and fear of
Mhm,
catching.
mhm,
So it's
mhm.
a major mixed lot of stuff. So yeah, and I even wonder, with all this violence and this shootings, I wonder how much pent up emotion is in these people who are so angry, who are doing
Oh,
these
yeah.
things. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
yes.
Yeah.
Because also, remember, behind anger, there is something much more vulnerable. And I'm
Yes.
not saying people should get angry and shoot people. I'm
No.
certainly not saying. But I do know anger by itself is a natural feeling.
Hmm.
I'm really pissed off at this.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's a natural. What you do with that anger is, again, most important. But I agree with you, Deb. I just think that um, people can act out in more violent ways because they really have strong feelings, not because what they're doing is always right, but they do have strong feelings, or how they were raised, was also really important. I worked with someone who said, my father always hit my mother. So I learned to just stay out of his way. And what he said is, I wondered if I would be someone hitting someone because I watched
Because
father
I
doing
was.
that.
Sure.
Yes, yes. And I said, that's important to talk about your feelings. And then what do you do? And you could get angry. You certainly do. It doesn't mean you have to hit people.
Right.
You may have to refrain in your brain. What do you want to do when you get angry? Because that's a normal feeling for a lot of people.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you were saying to find nonviolent ways.
Yes,
Nonviolent.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Which is,
Yeah.
which is why I get really upset when I still see a lot of discrimination um, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many nonviolent ways to participate, maybe by supporting a group, or maybe by going out and doing the walks
Mm-hmm.
or the protests that are nonviolent, or talking about it with other people. Absolutely.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And oh, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Well, I didn't say a lot at the very beginning about who you are and what you do, but I can certainly put anything in the notes. But do you want to say anything about either how people can find you or who you are and what it is? I mean, because you have done so much and you continue to do so much for many different kinds of people. Are you still taking new people?
Or yes, I'd be mostly at home now or by Zoom because we had to close down um, during COVID a Hollywood office, Hollywood, Florida. And I started out, we have Women's History Month coming up in March. So I always ask people, who was your role model? Who, when you were growing up, did you want to be like? And I wanted to be like Annie Sullivan. She taught Helen Keller. And
Yes.
I just grabbed onto role model and image, and I said, I want to be her. So I did get my undergraduate and master's training in deaf education and special ed. And so I worked with many, many students. And I always wanted to include information about your body, public, private parts, controlled by the brain, part in between, and safety. And safety, all right? And there's three types of safety. Here comes another number. There's physical safety, emotional or heart safety, and sexual safety. And for a
Beautiful.
little kid, I'm not saying you should go out and have sex, but if somebody's touching you on your private parts inappropriately, or somebody you shouldn't be, you go tell someone. And when they brought me words off bathroom walls, I thought, holy cow, I don't have any training in this, except my parents. My father was a minister, and in those days,
Uh-oh. It says you left. Oh gosh. I think it's the internet. Oh my gosh. Well, she might be able to pop back in and hopefully I can admit her into, oh my gosh, let's see. Mm, mm, Oh, good. Now you're here. Let's see. Are you in? Are you in?
yeah, I'm here. Can you
You're
hear me?
back. Okay, because it said you left. Okay.
I don't know,
Beautiful.
something bad, but I just wanted to say it was actually the deaf students who brought me words off bathroom walls. And
Yes.
then I got my doctorate. We had to go 9 years back and forth to San Francisco because that was one of the only places that had it. And so I got to learn a lot from a lot of people around the world. I was very pleased. And so we got to teach in medical schools, um, in talking in many institutions. I think it's where I met you, Deb.
Yes,
When we
yes, we did. You got me involved in some of that. Yes.
oh, I love it. I loved it.
Oh,
Always, always. And um, the I don't know if you'll remember this, but so I remember when somebody asked, sometimes people ask, I say weird or holy cow. And I remember they asked you, do blind people have sex? And I wanted to look at it and go, what? Why are you saying? And you said, you just came out with the funniest, well, manually, of course. That was your first word. And then
man.
we manually, and then we went on to talk about all of the um, sexuality
I
issues.
might, I might have also said, because I often wanted to say when people would say, well, how do blind people do it?
Yes.
I would sometimes say it's okay as long as you're okay with sticking it in the ear.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Now we have ear jobs. Now
Oh
we have
God,
ear.
ear
I love it.
jobs.
I love it. I
Oh my
love it.
God.
And I've been very fortunate because we started the first women's history group at Miami-Dade downtown campus. We started the first uh, LGBT group, teen group there because of three gay young men who wanted a place to meet. And I asked them, where did they meet? And they were like 15 years old, like my 51-year-old son was 15 at the time. And they said I know, Matthew, I
Oh
know.
my,
Can you imagine
remember, I
51?
met him when he was 12.
Yes, yes,
Wow. And Adam was 2. Oh my
yes, yes.
God.
And now they're both grown-up men with their
Oh,
spouses and children. And Matthew's a counselor and teacher in school systems. So that's an interesting to see young people that you knew and worked with. And so we got to teach together in lots of places. And I was so grateful to be able to co-teach with you, Deb, and
oh,
many other people who
yeah.
shared their experience.
Hmm.
I call when people ask you that question, and I like the ear response. Now I know what I'm going to tell them what my friend Debbie's going to say. So that, but they got to see real experts to me. That when real experts, what we go through in our lives.
Hmm.
Um, then we started the first AIDS project here, and so I've been very blessed to be in many situations. I'm comfortable to go into very religious arenas because that was my background growing up. And my first husband, we had a church here in North Florida. And that part, we also got involved with a Pedro Pan, getting the kids to safety, and the farm workers, getting them information. So again, but I've never done this by myself, Debbie. It's been a team. I call
Oh,
it the dream team, the
yeah.
dream team, and you are part of that
Oh, I'm so
because I
honored. Yeah.
cannot cannot do this by myself. Cannot. But I still
Mhm.
like to talk to parents and taking in cases. But because we train students, I also like to refer. I like to
That's really,
refer, and
yeah.
that's fine. People open doors for me, and I want to pay that forward.
Well, and
Absolutely.
you do, although, oh my gosh, you are legendary in your style, your approach. You know, I know you refer, and I'm sure there are good people out there, but there's no one, there's just no one like you. And, you know, I remember knowing that you grew up with a minister as a father and with your first husband as a minister, and then you got with David and
Yep.
you grew up as Lutheran and David is Jewish, and so
Yes.
I know you celebrate both holidays in your home in all of them. And but I remember one day hearing you, and I thought, you are still out there doing the sort of the religious thing. And I say that sort of with tongue in cheek. Here I go, sounding like body,
Oh,
but
yes.
and I remember thinking you're still out there saying you can be healed of your sexuality or anything that's bothering you. You can be healed.
Yep. Yep. If you got the right dream team, absolutely. Absolutely.
One
Which is
time
why
one time I introduced you in something we did, and I said, that you do all these different things, like I'm trying to remember what they were, but they were things like I don't even remember, but they all had the things you've done with ATED, that you had done all these things with ATED. And I said, it's amazing that all these words that describe you and what you've done have ATE in them.
Oh, okay. Well, that is true. That is true. And I've been very, very, very fortunate to really continue. And now we have some really, I'm just going to say this line. We have some really, in our state, pretty scary new laws that have been suggested and implemented. So we seem to be going backward,
Oh, no.
where, oh yeah, where teachers can't teach, like, we don't teach little kids in kindergarten, first grade how to have sex. That is not. But if they had, the suggestion was, well, if you talk about transgender kids, you're making a kid transgender. And I said, that's not how it works. That is really not. But if my parents told me that God loves all people, all, that means all to me. That means all to me. Doesn't I have to agree with everything, but if you're to value all, that was what I was taught, and so that I value about the message.
Right.
Grateful. And the interesting part is when you talked about David, he's a business guy and he happens to be Jewish. And I always tell Christian people, Jesus was Jewish.
That's right.
He was not a white Christian boy.
Thank you.
English.
Yeah.
Not.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you can't honor Jesus. That's not what I'm saying. But please learn some history and don't discriminate. So
right.
that part, oh yes. And I look forward to talking to you more, and also I look forward to training with you more. Yay, you.
Yay.
And I love that you have a podcast. Yay, you.
Me too. And it's called This Time Around because it's always possible for things to be different this time around than what it was even 5 minutes ago or last year or last lifetime or however it is that you, the listener, and all of us experience. I think experience learning is where it's really at.
I love that. That's great. I'm doing sign language for congratulations.
Yay.
I'm doing language for stars.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you and I collect stars. I know. How can people reach you? How do you want them to reach you?
Oh, well, you can go right on my email and you'll remember it because I tell people to be safe. So it's be safe with my initials, MV, be safe, mv@gmail.com.
Okay, that's great. That's wonderful. All right, I will put that in the show notes as well. And I can't thank you enough, my wonderful friend. I just thank you profusely. I love you so much.
Sending love and thank you and for having this, and you're welcome. And all the listeners, enjoy their sexuality. Be safe out there.
Be safe.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.